Black woman saves lost millionaire dog, unaware it's worth millions. The wind howled through the narrow alleyways of Oakwood Heights, drowning out the distant sirens and hurried footsteps of the city beyond. Rain pounded mercilessly against the pavement as Marlene Jefferson stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. The white poodle, muddy, trembling, and clearly expensive, cowered beneath the dumpster, its eyes reflecting both terror and hope. Behind her, headlights swept across the brick wall as a black SUV crawled down the street, its tinted windows concealing whoever searched inside. Marlene made her decision in an instant, scooping the whimpering animal into her arms and pressing herself against the wall, praying the darkness would swallow them both. "I don't want any trouble," she whispered to the dog, whose rapid heartbeat pulsed against her rain-soaked jacket. "But something tells me you're running from more than just the storm." 72 hours earlier, Marlene's life had been utterly ordinary. At 58, she had settled into the comfortable rhythms of her days, teaching piano to neighborhood children in the mornings, tending to her small garden in the afternoons, and enjoying quiet evenings with her record collection and a cup of tea. Widowed 5 years prior, she had made peace with solitude, finding joy in simple pleasures and the occasional visits from her daughter and grandchildren who lived 3 hours away. On Monday morning, Marlene awoke to sunshine streaming through her bedroom curtains, casting golden patterns across the quilt her mother had made decades ago. The familiar creaks of her century-old Victorian home greeted her as she padded downstairs, switching on the radio to catch the morning news. Gladys Knight's "Midnight Train to Georgia" filled the kitchen, a song that transported her back to 1973, dancing in her parents' living room while her father nodded approvingly to the rhythm. "Breaking news," the announcer cut in, interrupting her nostalgic reverie. "The search continues for Duchess, the champion show poodle belonging to tech billionaire Richard Whitfield. The dog, valued at over $3 million for her rare bloodline and championship status, disappeared during yesterday's charity gala at the Westwood Country Club. Whitfield is offering a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return." Marlene shook her head, turning down the volume. $3 million for a dog," she muttered, measuring coffee grounds into her percolator, the same one she'd bought with her first teaching paycheck in 1989. Meanwhile, they're closing the community center for lack of funding. The morning progressed as usual. 10-year-old Jessie arrived at 9 for her lesson, struggling through her scales before tackling a simplified version of Mozart. At noon, Mrs. Peterson from next door stopped by with a loaf of banana bread and neighborhood gossip. "They say that Whitfield fellow's going crazy over his missing dog," Mrs. Peterson said, accepting a cup of tea. Her ringed fingers, marked with age spots and adorned with her late husband's wedding band, wrapped around the porcelain. "Hired private investigators and everything. You'd think it was a missing child." "Some people have more money than sense," Marlene replied, though a part of her understood the attachment to a beloved pet. After her husband Thomas passed, the silence in their home had been deafening. Many nights she'd found herself wishing for even the simple companionship of a cat or dog, but her allergies had always made that impossible. "Well, keep an eye out," Mrs. Peterson advised. "That reward could set someone up nicely for retirement." After her friend left, Marlene spent the afternoon replanting her window boxes with autumn flowers. The simple act of pressing her hands into cool soil centered her, as it always had. Her mother had taught her gardening when she was just a girl in rural Georgia, explaining how even the smallest patch of earth could yield beauty if tended with patience and care. That evening, she walked to the corner market for groceries. The neighborhood had changed dramatically since she and Thomas bought their home in 1992. What had once been a predominantly black middle-class area had gentrified rapidly in recent years. New coffee shops and boutiques replaced family businesses, and sleek modern townhomes towered over the original houses. Still, pockets of the old community remained, like Mr. Washington's Market, where prices stayed reasonable and everyone knew each other by name. "Evening, Miss Marlene," called Mr. Washington from behind the counter. At 72, he stood as straight as ever, his white hair cropped close to his scalp. "You heard about this dog business? Whole city's gone mad looking for some fancy poodle." "So I've heard," she replied, selecting a few ripe tomatoes. "Hard to believe there's that much fuss over an animal when children go missing every day without half the attention." Mr. Washington nodded sagely. "Different worlds, Miss Marlene, always been that way." As she paid for her groceries, thunder rumbled in the distance. "Better hurry home," Mr. Washington warned. "Weatherman says we're in for a big one tonight." Marlene quickened her pace, but the storm moved faster. Halfway home, the skies opened. She ducked under the awning of what used to be Thompson's Hardware but was now an artisanal cheese shop, clutching her paper grocery bag as rain pounded the sidewalk. That's when she heard it, a soft whimpering coming from the narrow alley beside the building. Curious and concerned, Marlene peered into the shadows. At first, she saw nothing. Then a flash of lightning illuminated a small, huddled shape pressed against the brick wall. "Hello," she called softly, stepping carefully into the alley. "Anyone there?" Another whimper answered her, distinctly canine. Marlene moved closer, squinting in the dim light. A dog, a poodle, by the looks of it, cowered behind a stack of empty produce crates. Its pristine white coat was now matted and gray with dirt, and it trembled violently, whether from cold or fear she couldn't tell. "Well, aren't you in a sorry state?" Marlene murmured, setting down her groceries and crouching despite her protesting knees. "Come on out now, I won't hurt you." The dog regarded her warily, intelligent eyes assessing her from beneath a fringe of curly fur. Slowly, Marlene extended her hand, palm up in a non-threatening gesture. Minutes passed in standoff, rain dripping from the awning above. Finally, the poodle inched forward, nose twitching as it sniffed her fingers. When Marlene didn't move, it came closer still, until she could see a glint of metal at its neck, a diamond-studded collar partially hidden by matted fur. "Somebody's looking for you, I'd wager," she said softly, noticing how the dog's ribs showed beneath its coat. "And they haven't been feeding you properly, have they?" A particularly loud crack of thunder sent the dog scrambling into her arms, nearly knocking Marlene off balance. She laughed despite herself, the warm weight against her chest strangely comforting. "All right then, decision made," she told the poodle, gathering her groceries with her free arm. "You're coming home with me until this storm passes. Tomorrow we'll figure out where you belong." The walk home was awkward with her arms full, but the dog remained surprisingly cooperative, as if sensing Marlene's good intentions. Once inside her house, she set about creating a makeshift bed from old towels in the kitchen. "You'll stay here tonight," she informed the poodle, who watched her movements with curious eyes. "I can't have you on the furniture with all that dirt. My allergies will be bad enough as it is." After placing a bowl of water and some leftover chicken on the floor, Marlene retreated to her bathroom for a long, hot shower. The events of the evening felt surreal. She, Marlene Jefferson, who hadn't so much as pet a dog in decades due to her allergies, was now harboring one in her kitchen. When she emerged in her robe, she was surprised to find the dog hadn't touched the food. Instead, it sat primly on the towels, watching the door as if waiting for permission. "Well, you certainly have manners," Marlene observed. "Go ahead, eat, you must be starving." As if understanding her words, the poodle delicately approached the bowl and began to eat, taking small, polite bites. Marlene watched in fascination. She'd expected a half-starved stray to wolf down the food, but this animal ate with almost human restraint. After dinner, her curiosity got the better of her. Kneeling beside the poodle, she gently examined the diamond collar, looking for identification. The tag read simply Duchess, with no address or phone number. "Duchess," she repeated, and the dog's ears perked up immediately. "Is that your name, girl?" The poodle gave a soft yip of what seemed like confirmation, and Marlene felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with her wet hair. Duchess, the missing $3 million dog from the radio announcement. She was harboring what might be the most valuable canine in the city. "Oh, Lord," she whispered, sinking onto a kitchen chair. "What have I got myself into?" If you are, please hit subscribe and comment below telling us where you're watching from. Now let's continue with Marlene's increasingly dangerous situation. As they debated options, Duchess suddenly sat up straight, ears perked forward. A low growl rumbled in her throat, the first aggressive sound Marlene had heard from her. "Someone's coming," Marcus said, instantly alert. His military training evident in how quickly he moved to the door, peering through the small window. "Man in a suit showing something to the receptionist. She's pointing this way." "Back exit," Evelyn said tersely, gathering Duchess's leash. "Through the surgical suite and out the loading dock. My car's in the staff lot, blue Subaru, 3rd row, take my keys." "You can't be involved in this," Marlene protested, even as Marcus ushered her toward the indicated door. "I'm already involved," Evelyn replied grimly, pressing her key fob into Marlene's hand. "Go, I'll stall him." The next few minutes passed in a blur as Marcus guided Marlene and Duchess through the labyrinthine back corridors of the veterinary hospital, past startled technicians and through doors marked staff only. They emerged into bright sunlight at the loading dock, hurrying across the exposed concrete to the staff parking lot. "There," Marcus pointed to Evelyn's blue Subaru. "You drive. I'll follow in my truck once I'm sure you're clear." "Where am I going?" Marlene asked, panic threatening to overwhelm her. Marcus thought for a moment. "The old fishing cabin. Thomas would have told you about it." Recognition flashed through Marlene's mind, a rustic retreat on Lake Mitchell where Thomas and his friends had spent countless weekends fishing and playing cards. She'd visited only a handful of times in their early marriage. I remember, but that was 30 years ago. Is it still there? Still there, still used occasionally. It's remote, no paper trail connecting it to you. Marcus glanced nervously toward the building. Keys are in the fake rock by the back step, same as always. Go now before they spot us. With Duchess in the passenger seat, Marlene navigated through city traffic with forced calm, constantly checking her mirrors for signs of pursuit. Only when the urban landscape gave way to rural highways did she allow herself to breathe more easily. The cabin proved more difficult to find than she'd anticipated. Roads had changed, landmarks disappeared, and her memories had faded with time. It was late afternoon by the time she finally turned onto the rutted dirt track that led to the small wooden structure nestled among towering pines. As promised, a key lay hidden in a hollow fake rock beside the back steps. Inside, the cabin was basic but clean, a main room with kitchenette and sitting area, a small bedroom, and a bathroom with running water but no shower. The furnishings were mismatched and worn but serviceable, speaking of decades of casual use. "Well, this is home for now," Marlene told Duchess, who explored the new space with her usual methodical curiosity. "At least until we figure out what to do next." There was no cell service, but an old landline phone sat on the kitchen counter. Marlene tried it, relieved to hear a dial tone. She called Marcus's prepaid phone, leaving a brief message that she'd arrived safely before hanging up, conscious of potential call tracing. As daylight faded, Marlene found candles and matches, reluctant to turn on lights that might be visible from the lake. She located canned goods in the cupboards, beans, soup, tuna enough to sustain them for a few days at least. Duchess settled on a threadbare rug before the small fireplace, watching as Marlene built a fire against the evening chill. The dancing flames cast shifting shadows across the poodle's intelligent face, highlighting the uncanny awareness in her eyes. "What did they do to you?" Marlene whispered, settling beside the dog. "And what happens if they get you back?" Duchess shifted closer, resting her head on Marlene's lap in a gesture that felt like both comfort and protection. For the first time since finding the poodle, Marlene allowed herself to fully contemplate what Evelyn had suggested, that this animal might possess intelligence far beyond normal canine capacity, artificially enhanced through some experimental procedure. The ethical implications were staggering. True, was Duchess still property to be returned? Or was she something more, a being with rights of her own? And what responsibility did that place on Marlene, who now held this creature's fate in her hands? Sleep came fitfully that night, with Marlene jolting awake at every creak of the old cabin and rustle of wind through the pines. Duchess remained vigilant, positioned between Marlene and the door like a guardian. Morning brought weak sunlight filtering through dusty windows and the sound of tires on gravel. Marlene froze, heart pounding, until she recognized Marcus's blue pickup through the window. "Brought supplies," he announced, entering with bags of groceries and a duffel of clothing. "And news not good, I'm afraid." Over coffee brewed on the ancient gas stove, Marcus shared what he'd learned. "They filed a police report claiming you stole the dog. There's a warrant out for your arrest, Marlene." "That's absurd," she protested. "I found her abandoned in an alley. I was planning to return her until—" She trailed off, remembering Harrington's cold eyes and Evelyn's disturbing findings. "Until you realized something wasn't right," Marcus finished for her. "I believe you, but they're spinning a different story, claiming you took her from a handler at the charity event and have been hiding her for ransom." "Ransom?" Marlene's voice rose in disbelief. "I never asked for money." "Makes for a better story than the truth, I imagine." Marcus's expression was grim. "They've got resources, connections." "Your word against theirs. What about Evelyn, the surgical scars she found?" "Evelyn's being careful, says she never examined any poodle and has no records of such a visit." He met Marlene's eyes. "She's protecting herself and you. Without hard evidence, her professional reputation would be destroyed if she supported your claims." Marlene nodded, understanding the impossible position her presence had placed Evelyn in. "So I'm a fugitive now, at 58, over a dog." "Not just any dog," Marcus reminded her, glancing at Duchess, who sat alertly beside them, following the conversation with unnerving focus. "The question is, what's your next move?" It was a question Marlene had wrestled with all night. "I need proof," she said finally. "Proof of what they've done to her, something concrete enough that they can't simply deny it or make it disappear." "And then what?" "Then I take it public, all of it, the experiments, the implants, the warrant, everything." Marcus considered this, absently running a hand through his gray hair. "Risky, very risky. These people have resources, influence. They could bury any story, discredit any witness." "Not if the witness is credible enough," Marlene countered, and not if the evidence is irrefutable. What kind of evidence are we talking about? Marlene looked directly at Duchess. Medical scans showing the implants, documentation linking Whitfield to illegal experimentation, and, she hesitated, an idea forming. Proof of Duchess's enhanced intelligence, something no normal dog could possibly do. And how do you propose getting medical scans without taking her to a hospital or finding documentation that's probably locked in some corporate vault? It was a fair question, one Marlene had no immediate answer for. But as she opened her mouth to admit as much, the landline phone rang sharply, startling them both. Marcus moved to answer it, but Marlene stopped him. "Nobody knows we're here," she whispered. "Nobody should be calling." They let it ring until the ancient answering machine clicked on. After the beep came a familiar voice that sent ice through Marlene's veins. "Ms. Jefferson," said James Harrington smoothly, "I believe you have something that belongs to Mr. Whitfield. We should discuss terms for its return. I'm sure we can reach an arrangement beneficial to all parties." The message ended, leaving a heavy silence broken only by Duchess's soft whine. "How?" Marlene whispered, panic rising. "How did they find us?" Marcus's expression was thunderous. "They're tracking the dog," he realized. "Not by collar or chip. Evelyn would have found those. It must be the implants themselves. Can they pinpoint our exact location?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but we can't take that chance. We need to move, now." As they hastily gathered their belongings, Marlene's mind raced. If Duchess's implants contained tracking technology, there was nowhere they could hide, not for long. Each new location would eventually be compromised, unless— "We need to block the signal," she said suddenly, stopping in the middle of packing food into a bag. "Whatever's transmitting from those implants, we need to stop it." Marcus considered this. "Like a Faraday cage, something that blocks electromagnetic signals." "Exactly. Would a metal box work?" Or, Marlene's eyes lit with sudden inspiration. "The old storm cellar at my house. Thomas lined it with metal sheeting during the Cold War, his own private fallout shelter. He always said no radio signals could penetrate it." "Your house is the first place they'll look," Marcus objected. "It's probably still being watched." "Which makes it the last place they'd expect us to return to," Marlene countered. "We go at night, use the tunnel entrance from the garden shed. Once we're in the cellar, we'll have time to think, plan our next move without them tracking us." Marcus shook his head, but there was reluctant admiration in his eyes. "Thomas always said you were the strategist in the family. High risk, but it might just work." They left the cabin within minutes, taking separate vehicles, Marcus in his truck, Marlene and Duchess in Evelyn's borrowed Subaru, which they planned to abandon at a shopping center before continuing together in the pickup. As they drove away, Marlene caught a last glimpse of the cabin in her rearview mirror. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine an alternate reality, one where she had never ventured down that rain-soaked alley, never encountered a trembling white poodle with unnaturally intelligent eyes. Her life would have continued in its quiet, predictable patterns. She would have remained safe, anonymous, unremarkable. But she also would have remained alone. Glancing at Duchess in the passenger seat, Marlene felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. "Figure this out," she promised the poodle, who watched her with unwavering trust. "Whatever it takes." And as they sped toward an uncertain future, Marlene Jefferson, widow, piano teacher, unlikely fugitive, realized that for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. We've reached an exciting point in our story. If you're enjoying it, please remember to subscribe and leave a comment letting us know what you think will happen next. Now, back to Marlene and Duchess as they execute their daring plan. Darkness had fallen by the time they approached Marlene's neighborhood. Marcus drove past her house once, slowly, noting the unmarked car parked across the street with a man visible in the driver's seat. "Just one that I can see," he murmured as they continued down the block. "Probably expecting us to come through the front if we're stupid enough to return." "We'll access the garden from the alley," Marlene replied, studying the familiar streets now transformed into hostile territory. "The shed is hidden by hedges. If we're quiet, we can reach the cellar entrance without being seen from the street." They parked 3 blocks away, walking separately to avoid attention, Marcus first, then Marlene with Duchess close at her side. The poodle seemed to understand the need for stealth, moving silently through shadows without the guidance of a leash. The back alley was mercifully empty, illuminated only by distant streetlights and the occasional glow from a kitchen window. Marlene paused at her garden gate, listening intently before easing it open just enough for them to slip through. Her beloved garden, normally a source of peace, now felt exposed and dangerous. They crept along the hedge line, avoiding the open lawn, until they reached the weathered shed tucked against the property's back boundary. Inside, Marcus used his phone's flashlight to locate the trapdoor hidden beneath a workbench. an entrance Thomas had created decades ago, connecting to the storm cellar beneath the house. "Ladies first," he whispered, lifting the heavy wooden door to reveal a short tunnel reinforced with timbers. "Watch your head." The passage was narrower than Marlene remembered, forcing her to crouch as she moved forward with Duchess following obediently. Behind them, Marcus eased the trapdoor shut before joining their awkward procession. The tunnel opened into the storm cellar, a concrete room roughly 12 feet square, lined with metal sheeting just as Marlene had described. Thomas had stocked it with shelves of canned goods, jugs of water, and other emergency supplies, most now long expired. "Home sweet home," Marcus muttered, sweeping his light across the dusty space. "At least temporarily. If I'm right, they won't be able to track Duchess while we're in here," Marlene said, finding and switching on an old battery-powered lantern. Its yellow glow revealed cobwebs and dust, but the cellar was otherwise intact. "It should buy us time to figure out our next steps." "Which are?" Marcus settled onto a folding chair, its metal joints creaking in protest. Marlene didn't immediately answer. Instead, she watched as Duchess methodically explored the small space, sniffing each corner and examining the shelves with obvious curiosity. "Proof," she finally said. "We need proof of what they've done to her, something so compelling that going public would be more damaging to Whitfield than whatever they might do to discredit me. Without medical equipment or access to corporate records, that's a tall order." "Not necessarily." Marlene's gaze remained fixed on Duchess. "If she's as intelligent as we suspect, if those implants have given her cognitive abilities approaching human levels, then she herself is the evidence." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting what? That she can communicate somehow?" "I don't know." Marlene approached the poodle, who had settled on a folded blanket in the corner. "But there's one way to find out." Kneeling before Duchess, Marlene looked directly into those uncannily aware eyes. "You understand everything we're saying, don't you?" she asked softly. "You know we're trying to help you." Duchess held her gaze steadily but made no response beyond a slight tilt of her head. "If you understand me," Marlene continued, "give me a sign, something no ordinary dog would do." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with deliberate slowness, Duchess raised her right paw and tapped it against the concrete floor once, twice, 3 times. Marcus sucked in a sharp breath. "Could be a trained response," he said, though his voice held doubt. "Duchess," Marlene said, heart racing. "How many people are in this room right now?" The poodle tapped twice without hesitation. "What's 7 minus 4? 3 taps. "My God," Marcus whispered, moving closer. "She's not just responding to commands, she's calculating." Emboldened, Marlene continued. "Duchess, do you know who Richard Whitfield is?" A single tap accompanied by a low growl. "Did he hurt you? Did he authorize the implants?" Another tap, more emphatic this time. "Are there others like you?" The poodle hesitated, then tapped once, followed by a whine that sounded almost mournful. Marlene and Marcus exchanged stunned glances. "We need to record this," he said urgently. "Video evidence." "Not yet," Marlene cautioned. "First, we need to establish a more complex communication system. Yes, no questions only get us so far." Over the next hour, they worked together to create a rudimentary communication method. Marcus found a piece of cardboard among the shelter supplies, and Marlene used a marker from her purse to create a simple letter board divided into quadrants. "Top left for A through G," she explained to Duchess, who watched with focused attention. "Top right for H through M, bottom left for N through S, bottom right for T through Z. I'll point to each quadrant, and you tap when I reach the one with your letter. Then I'll say the letters in that section, and you tap when I reach the right one." It was slow and cumbersome, but to their amazement it worked. Letter by letter, Duchess spelled out her first message, "Not dog." "Not dog," Marlene repeated, baffled. "What does that mean, you're not a dog?" Duchess began the laborious process again. "HUMAN DNA, human DNA," Marcus translated, his expression darkening. "They spliced human DNA into her genome. That's why the enhanced intelligence, why she can understand language." "Is that even possible?" Marlene asked, though the evidence sat before them, watching their reactions with unmistakable comprehension. "Theoretically, yes. Legally, absolutely not. It violates every ethical guideline in existence." Duchess tapped impatiently to continue. "ESCAPED, you escaped," Marlene nodded. "From the charity event, that's why you were in that alley hiding." "MORELIKEMEHELPTHEM, more like you," Marcus read. "Help them, there are others being experimented on." "LABBASEMENTWHITFIELDHOME, the implications were staggering. Not just isolated experiments, but an ongoing program of genetic manipulation, hidden in plain sight beneath a billionaire's mansion. If true, it represented crimes against nature that would shock the world and destroy Whitfield Enterprises completely. "We need to get this on video," Marcus said firmly. "Irrefutable proof of her abilities. Then we take it to the authorities, the real ones, not Whitfield's private security." "And if they're compromised too?" Marlene challenged. "If Whitfield has the influence we suspect, then we go public. Every news outlet, social media platform, whistleblower site, anywhere that will listen." As they debated strategies, a sudden noise from above silenced them, footsteps on the floor of Marlene's house, directly overhead. "They're inside," Marcus whispered, automatically reaching for Duchess's collar to keep her still. "Stay quiet." Minutes stretched into an hour as they sat in tense silence, listening to the muffled sounds of movement through the ceiling. Occasionally, voices filtered down too indistinct to make out words, but urgent in tone. Finally, the noises receded, followed by the distant slam of Marlene's front door. Still, they waited, unwilling to risk discovery until they were certain the intruders had truly departed. "We need to move," Marcus said eventually. "This hiding place won't stay secure for long. Sooner or later, they'll think to check the cellar." "But where?" Marlene asked. "They can track Duchess anywhere else." Before Marcus could respond, Duchess began tapping urgently on the letter board. "COLLAR, your collar." Marlene frowned, confused. "We left it hidden in my house." TRACKERINCOLLARNOTME, understanding dawned. "The tracker is in the collar, not in your implants," Marlene translated. "They've been following the collar all this time, not you." Duchess confirmed with a single tap. "But that means," Marcus trailed off, implications sinking in, "they think you're still wearing it. They're expecting to find both of you together. Which explains why they're searching my house so thoroughly," Marlene finished. "The signal led them here, but they can't find the actual dog." Hope surged through her. If the tracker was only in the collar, they had options: mobility, the ability to seek help without constantly being found. But it also meant Marlene's home was no longer safe. The hidden collar would continue to draw Whitfield's men back to this location. "We need to recover that collar," Marcus decided. "Use it to our advantage somehow." "First, we need proof," Marlene insisted. "Irrefutable evidence of what Duchess is, what they've done to her." She turned to the poodle. "Are you willing to be recorded, to show the world what you can do?" Duchess considered this for a long moment before tapping once yes. Using Marcus's phone, they filmed a series of clips showing Duchess responding to complex questions, spelling out sentences, performing calculations no dog should be capable of. They recorded her account of the experiments, the lab beneath Whitfield's mansion, the other animals being subjected to similar procedures. When they finished, Marcus checked the battery life on his phone down to 20%. "We need to charge this somewhere safe. This evidence can't be lost." "I know someone who might help," Marlene said after a moment's thought. "My former student, Zach, he works in tech, now cybersecurity or something similar. He'd know how to protect this footage, make copies, distribute it safely." "Can he be trusted?" "He brought me soup every week for 6 months after Thomas died," Marlene said simply. "Yes, he can be trusted." Decision made, they prepared to leave the relative safety of the cellar. The plan was straightforward but dangerous. Retrieve the hidden collar from inside the house, contact Zach to arrange a meeting, then use the collar to misdirect Whitfield's men while they sought help with the evidence. "Ready?" Marcus asked, hand on the tunnel entrance. Marlene looked at Duchess, who sat alert and ready. "As will ever be." The tunnel seemed longer on the return journey, tension stretching each moment as they crawled toward the shed. Emerging into the cool night air, they paused to listen. No sounds of pursuit, no indication they'd been discovered. "I'll go for the collar," Marlene whispered. "You and Duchess wait by the garden gate. If anything happens, leave without me." "Not a chance," Marcus replied firmly. "We stick together. And if we're both caught, what happens to Duchess then?" She held his gaze until he reluctantly nodded. 5 minutes, he conceded. "Any longer and I'm coming in after you." Marlene crept toward her back door, trying keys with agonizing slowness to minimize noise. Inside, the house was dark and eerily silent, evidence of the search visible in displaced furniture and scattered belongings. Moving by memory and touch, she made her way to the bookshelf where she'd hidden the collar. The hollow book was still there, undisturbed amid the chaos. Inside, the diamond-studded collar gleamed in the faint light from the street. Mission accomplished, Marlene retraced her steps to the back door and froze. Headlights swept across the front of the house, followed by the sound of car doors closing. They had returned. Heart pounding, she slipped outside just as voices approached the front porch. In the shadows of the garden, Marcus and Duchess waited tensely. "They're back," Marlene hissed, showing the collar. "We need to go now." They retreated through the garden gate into the alley, moving swiftly but quietly away from the house. Behind them, lights flared to life in Marlene's home as the search resumed. We've got maybe minutes before they realize the collar and the dog are no longer in the same location, Marcus said as they hurried toward his truck. Where's Zach live? Riverview Apartments downtown, Marlene replied, clutching the collar tightly. About 20 minutes from here. As they drove, Marlene used Marcus's phone to call Zach, praying he would answer an unknown number at this late hour. To her relief, his familiar voice came through after the third ring. Zach, it's Marlene Jefferson, she said without preamble. I'm in trouble and I need your help. It's complicated and probably dangerous. I'll understand if you say no. There was a pause then. Ms. J, are you okay? Are you hurt? I'm fine, but I can't explain everything over the phone. Can we come to your apartment just for a little while? Of course, he replied without hesitation. Should I call the police? No police, Marlene said firmly. Not yet. We'll explain when we get there. We'll be there in 15 minutes, Marcus added, taking the phone momentarily. And Zach, don't tell anyone we're coming, not even people you trust. As they navigated through nighttime streets, Marlene allowed herself a moment of doubt. Was she right to involve her former student in this dangerous situation? Was she putting another life at risk? Beside her, Duchess rested a paw on her knee as if sensing her turmoil. The gesture, so human in its timing and intent, reaffirmed Marlene's resolve. This wasn't just about her safety anymore. It was about justice for a being who straddled the line between animal and person, and for others like her still trapped in Whitfield's lab. The Riverview Apartments loomed ahead, a modern high-rise overlooking the river that divided the city. As promised, Zach was waiting at the service entrance, his expression shifting from concern to confusion as he saw Marcus and the pristine white poodle accompanying his former piano teacher. Ms. J, he greeted her with a quick hug. What's going on? You look like you haven't slept in days. It's a long story, Marlene replied, noting how her once gangly student had grown into a confident young man. Is there somewhere private we can talk? Zach led them through service corridors to avoid the main lobby's security cameras, a precaution that raised Marcus's eyebrows appreciatively. In the elevator, he studied Duchess with open curiosity. Nice dog, he commented. Poodle, right. It's expensive. More than you know, Marlene said grimly. That's part of what we need to discuss. Zach's apartment was exactly what Marlene would have expected from her technologically inclined former student, sleek, modern, and dominated by computers and electronic equipment. 3 large monitors glowed on a desk in the corner, lines of code scrolling across one screen. Sorry about the mess, he said, hastily clearing takeout containers from the coffee table. Wasn't expecting company. Once they were settled, Marlene began the incredible tale finding Duchess, discovering the implants, learning of the illegal experimentation, and finally, establishing communication with a being that was no ordinary dog. To his credit, Zach listened without interruption, his expression shifting from skepticism to shock as the story unfolded. When Marlene finished, he sat in silence for a long moment, processing. You realize how this sounds, right? He finally said. If anyone else told me this story, I'd think they were having a psychotic break. Show him, Marcus urged, handing over his phone with the video evidence queued up. Zach watched intently as the screen displayed Duchess responding to questions, solving problems, and spelling out complex thoughts. By the time the video ended, his face had drained of color. He struggled for words. This is like something out of a sci-fi movie. Human DNA spliced into animals, secret underground labs. It's insane. But real, Marlene insisted. Very real, and we need your help to expose it. What exactly do you need me to do? Protect this evidence, Marcus said. Make copies, store them securely, and help us distribute it in a way that can't be traced back to any of us. Zach rubbed his temples, clearly overwhelmed. You're talking about taking on one of the richest men in the country. If what you're saying is true, Whitfield has resources we can't even imagine. Which is why we need to be smarter, Marlene replied. Use technology to our advantage. After a moment's consideration, Zach nodded decisively. I'll help, but we need to be strategic about this. Dumping the video online isn't enough. It could be dismissed as a hoax, buried under legal threats, or simply lost in the daily flood of content. He moved to his computer setup, fingers flying across keyboards as multiple windows opened across the screens. First, we secure the evidence. Multiple encrypted copies stored in separate locations. Then we identify the right recipients, journalists with track records of investigating corporate malfeasance, regulatory agencies, animal rights organizations. How long will all this take? Marcus asked, glancing nervously at his watch. A few hours to do it right, Zach replied. But there's another problem we need to address immediately. He pointed to the diamond collar Marlene still held. If that thing is broadcasting your location, we're all in danger right now. He disappeared into another room, returning with what looked like a metal cookie tin. Faraday container, he explained, taking the collar and placing it inside. Blocks electromagnetic signals. Temporary solution, but it'll work for now. As Zach set to work securing their evidence, Marlene felt the adrenaline of the past days beginning to ebb, leaving bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. Duchess sensed her fatigue pressing comfortingly against her leg. "Get some rest," Marcus urged, guiding her to Zach's sofa. "I'll keep watch." Marlene wanted to protest, but found herself unable to keep her eyes open. With Duchess curled protectively beside her, she drifted into an uneasy sleep, haunted by dreams of laboratories, implants, and creatures with human eyes trapped in animal bodies. We're nearing the conclusion of our story. If you've enjoyed it so far, please hit subscribe and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Now let's see how Marlene's incredible journey ends. She awoke to urgent voices and the golden light of dawn streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a disorienting moment, Marlene couldn't remember where she was or why her body ached with tension. Then Duchess licked her hand, and everything came rushing back. "They found us," Marcus was saying to Zach, who looked pale but determined at his computer station. "Security alert from your building management. Men claiming to be federal agents asking about a stolen dog." "How?" Marlene asked, fully alert now. "The collar is contained." "They must have tracked us another way," Marcus replied grimly. "Traffic cameras, maybe, or someone saw us enter the building." "We need to move," Zach said, disconnecting drives from his computers. "I've secured the evidence and initiated distribution to key contacts, but it will take time to gain traction." "Time we don't have," Marlene observed, peering cautiously through the blinds at the street below. A black SUV was parked directly across from the building entrance. "There's a service elevator that leads to the parking garage," Zach informed them, grabbing a backpack and stuffing equipment inside. "We can take my car." "And go where?" Marcus asked the question they were all thinking. "They've found us twice now. Nowhere seems safe." An idea formed in Marlene's mind, risky, perhaps foolhardy, but with a certain poetic justice to it. "We go to the source," she said quietly, "to Whitfield himself." "That's suicide," Marcus objected. "Not necessarily," Marlene countered. "Think about it, they want Duchess back quietly without public attention. That gives us leverage." "What are you suggesting?" Zach asked, pausing in his preparations. "We contact Whitfield directly, arrange a meeting somewhere public with witnesses. We bring the evidence, he brings answers. We explain exactly what we know and how widely the information will spread if anything happens to any of us." "A standoff," Marcus translated, "using information as our weapon." "It could work," Zach admitted, "especially if I set up dead man's switches on the evidence, automatic release to media outlets if we don't check in periodically." Marlene looked to Duchess, who had been following the conversation with obvious understanding. "What do you think?" "You know him better than any of us." Using the letter board they'd brought from the cellar, Duchess spelled out her response. DANGROUSBUTNECSSARY, decision made. They moved quickly. Zach programmed the dead man's switches while Marcus plotted the safest route to Whitfield Enterprises' headquarters downtown. Marlene, meanwhile, drafted a message to be delivered to Richard Whitfield himself, concise, non-threatening, but leaving no doubt about what they knew and what would happen if they weren't heard. They left the apartment building through the parking garage, successfully avoiding the watchers at the main entrance. In Zach's car, they circled the block once to confirm they weren't being followed before heading downtown. The morning rush hour provided both cover and complications as they navigated through traffic toward the gleaming glass tower that housed Whitfield's corporate empire. Marlene's heart pounded with each passing mile, but her resolve remained firm. Beside her, Duchess sat with regal composure, as if prepared to face her creator. "How do we get the message to Whitfield?" Marcus asked as the tower came into view. "We can't exactly walk into the lobby with Duchess in tow." "I've been thinking about that," Zach replied, parking in a public garage 2 blocks from their destination. "We need a diversion, something to draw attention away from Duchess while still getting Whitfield's personal attention." From his backpack, he produced the diamond collar still inside the Faraday container. "We use this. It's what they've been tracking all along." The plan came together quickly. Marcus would approach the building's reception desk with the collar and a printed copy of Marlene's message, demanding to speak with Whitfield personally. Meanwhile, Zach would wait with Marlene and Duchess in a coffee shop across the street, monitoring the situation through his phone and prepared to release the evidence at the first sign of trouble. "Remember," Marlene instructed Marcus, squeezing his hand. "Public spaces only. No private rooms, no isolated areas. And you have to be convinced he's come alone, without security." Marcus nodded, tucking the collar into his jacket pocket. I was handling delicate negotiations in Kosovo before you were born, he told Zach with a wry smile. I think I can manage one corporate billionaire. They watched from the coffee shop window as Marcus entered the tower, disappearing into the stream of morning commuters flowing through its revolving doors. Minutes stretched into an hour as they waited tensely, Duchess hidden beneath their table, Zach's fingers poised over his phone. Finally, Marcus's text arrived. Meeting set, Garden Terrace, top floor, public restaurant, coming to get you. 10 minutes later, they were ascending in a private elevator to the building's top floor, Marcus having returned to escort them inside. Security had been visibly present but made no move to stop them, a promising sign that Whitfield was taking their demands seriously. The Garden Terrace was an oasis of greenery 50 stories above the city, a restaurant and bar featuring spectacular views, and more importantly for their purposes, dozens of witnesses enjoying late breakfasts and early business meetings. Richard Whitfield waited at a corner table, alone as requested. In person, he appeared older than in his media appearances, lines of stress evident around his eyes despite his impeccable suit and camera-ready smile. Jefferson, he greeted Marlene as they approached, standing politely. His gaze immediately locked onto Duchess, something like relief flickering across his features. And Duchess, I'm glad to see she's unharmed. No thanks to your security team, Marlene replied coolly, taking a seat across from him. Marcus and Zach flanked her while Duchess sat alertly at her feet. They've been threatening me, breaking into my home, filing false police reports. Whitfield's smile tightened. A misunderstanding, I assure. When something valued at $3 million goes missing, sir, protocols are activated, sometimes overzealously. A misunderstanding, Marlene repeated flatly. Like the misunderstanding of splicing human DNA into animals, of conducting illegal genetic experiments in the basement of your mansion. The color drained from Whitfield's face, his practiced composure cracking for an instant before he recovered. Those are serious allegations, Ms. Jefferson. The kind that would require extraordinary evidence. Which we have, Zach interjected, placing his phone on the table with its screen displaying a single video thumbnail, Duchess spelling out her message. Along with distribution mechanisms already in place. For a long moment, Whitfield said nothing, his gaze moving between their faces, calculating. Then he sighed, a sound of genuine weariness. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, he said quietly. This goes far beyond what you imagine. Then explain it to us, Marlene challenged. Make us understand why you're playing God with living creatures. Whitfield glanced around, confirming no one was within earshot before leaning forward. What if I told you this research could eventually cure Alzheimer's, Parkinson's? What if cognitive enhancement techniques developed through these experiments could prevent millions of human minds from deteriorating with age? I'd say you're justifying atrocities with hypothetical benefits, Marlene replied without hesitation. Using ends to justify means. Easy moral absolutes from someone who's never had to make hard choices, Whitfield countered. My wife died of early-onset Alzheimer's 5 years ago. I watched her brilliant mind disintegrate until she couldn't recognize our children. I swore it wouldn't happen to others if I could prevent it. Despite herself, Marlene felt a flicker of sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, truly, but that doesn't give you the right to what? Whitfield interrupted. To pursue solutions outside conventional channels. The FDA approval process takes decades. Millions suffer and die waiting for bureaucrats to stamp forms. And the suffering of your test subjects, Marcus asked pointedly. Do they not count in your ethical calculus? Before Whitfield could respond, Duchess suddenly stood, her posture rigid. Following her gaze, Marlene spotted James Harrington entering the terrace, accompanied by 2 men whose jackets couldn't quite conceal their shoulder holsters. You promised to come alone, Marlene said sharply to Whitfield. And I did, he replied, appearing genuinely surprised by Harrington's arrival. I gave explicit instructions. Sir, Harrington approached, pointedly ignoring the others. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Whatever it is, it can wait, Whitfield replied tersely. I'm in the middle of an important discussion. I'm afraid it can't, sir. Harrington's hand moved subtly toward his jacket. It concerns Project Genesis. There's been a breach. Understanding dawned on Whitfield's face. You activated countermeasures without authorization. To protect your interests, sir, and the project. My interests? Whitfield's voice rose slightly. My interest was in resolving this situation quietly without violence or further complications. As the 2 men argued, Zach quietly activated his phone, broadcasting their conversation to his secure servers. Marlene moved closer to Duchess, ready to shield her if necessary. Sir, these people have stolen property worth millions and are now attempting blackmail, Harrington insisted. Standard security protocols, there is nothing standard about this situation, Whitfield snapped. And Duchess is not simply property, as you well know. The admission hung in the air between them. Harrington's expression hardened as he realized his employer had confirmed the very thing they were trying to conceal. Sir, perhaps we should continue this discussion privately, he suggested, glancing meaningfully at the other restaurant patrons, some of whom were beginning to notice the tension at their table. No, Marlene interjected firmly. Whatever happens next happens right here in public. Whitfield studied her for a long moment, then nodded slightly as if coming to a decision. James, stand down. That's an order. When Harrington hesitated, Whitfield added, or tender your resignation immediately. A tense silence followed before Harrington stepped back, his posture stiff with disapproval. As you wish, sir. Turning back to Marlene, Whitfield spread his hands in a gesture of conciliation. It seems we're at an impasse. You have evidence that could destroy everything I've built. I have resources that could make your lives difficult despite your precautions. Perhaps there's a third option. We're listening, Marcus said cautiously. A partnership, Whitfield proposed. Bring your ethical concerns inside rather than attacking from outside. Help me ensure the research proceeds humanely while still advancing. In return, you'd have oversight resources and my personal guarantee of safety. Absolutely not, Marlene replied without hesitation. The experiments stop completely, and Duchess stays with me. That's not negotiable, Whitfield countered. Duchess is the cornerstone of the entire program. Her neurological integration is unique, irreplaceable. She's not a cornerstone, Marlene said firmly. She's a living being with thoughts, feelings, and rights, and she's made her choice. As if on cue, Duchess moved to stand beside Marlene, pressing against her leg in a gesture unmistakable even to those unaware of her enhanced intelligence. You've spent enough time with her to know she's more than an experiment, Marlene continued, seeing the conflict in Whitfield's eyes. Deep down, I think you recognize that what you've created has moved beyond your control, beyond being property. Something shifted in Whitfield's expression, a mixture of resignation and dawning realization. And the others, there are 12 more subjects in various stages of enhancement. They all go free, Marlene insisted. To sanctuaries or appropriate homes with ongoing care funded by you but administered by independent organizations. And my research continues only through conventional ethical channels with proper oversight and regulatory approval. Whitfield laughed bitterly. You're asking me to set my work back by decades. I'm asking you to do it right, Marlene corrected. To be remembered as a pioneer who refused to sacrifice ethics for expedience, not as a monster who valued results over suffering. A long silence followed as Whitfield visibly wrestled with his options. Finally, he sighed deeply. You know, my wife would have agreed with you. She always said my greatest flaw was impatience, wanting to solve problems immediately instead of properly. He extended his hand across the table. We have a deal, Ms. Jefferson. I'll draw up the necessary paperwork today. But I want visiting rights with Duchess. That's her decision, not mine, Marlene replied, glancing down at the poodle. Understanding the implicit question, Duchess considered for a moment before giving a single, deliberate nod. I believe that's a yes, Marlene translated, finally accepting Whitfield's handshake. In the days that followed, events moved with surprising speed. True to his word, Whitfield signed legal documents transferring ownership of Duchess to Marlene, along with a substantial fund for her ongoing care. Similar arrangements were made for the other enhanced animals, each placed in environments suited to their specific needs. The evidence Zach had gathered remained secured but unreleased, a guarantee of compliance rather than a weapon of destruction. Harrington quietly disappeared from Whitfield Enterprises, replaced by a new security team with strict ethical guidelines. As for Marlene, she returned to her life of piano lessons and gardening, but with one significant difference. Where silence had once reigned in her home, there was now companionship. Duchess became her constant shadow, her unusual intelligence a secret shared between them and the small circle who had helped bring her to freedom. One evening, 6 months after their confrontation with Whitfield, Marlene sat on her porch swing with Duchess beside her, watching lightning bugs rise from the garden as twilight deepened. The poodle had developed an appreciation for these quiet moments, seeming to find peace in the simple beauty of the world she now freely inhabited. You know, Marlene said softly, stroking Duchess's silky ears, when I found you that night in the rain, I thought I was saving you. She smiled as the poodle looked up with those intelligent eyes. But sometimes I think maybe you were saving me too. Duchess rested her head on Marlene's lap in silent agreement, two souls connected across the boundaries of species and science, each having found in the other exactly what they needed most: understanding, purpose, and the quiet miracle of being truly seen. In the distance, a summer storm gathered, much like the one that had first brought them together. But this time, neither feared what approached. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything since that rainy night in the alley together. If you enjoyed this story, please hit subscribe and leave a comment letting us know what you thought. Your support helps us continue bringing you these immersive stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.